So good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning in Washington with all our friends connected thanks to the Bretton Woods Committee and thanks to the IMF and all our friends in Washington. So we are here now for this last session of our 7th edition of the Rome Investment Forum, and I'm here with Franco Del Neri, who will be with me for this final session. And but the most important thing is that in a few moments we will throw it to Milan, where Thomas Ebert will lead and will moderate a prestigious series of speeches on the issue related to the Europe in a wider arena. I mean, global transatlantic relations and new multilateral cooperation and so on. So, Tommaso, nice to see you. You will moderate from Milan, but your panelists are prestigious guests from all over the world. So please, hello, the floor is yours.
Buon pomeriggio, good afternoon, everyone. And I will come you to the final session of this Rome Virtual Investment Forum, organized, as you know, by the Banking, Insurance, Finance Federation. We are going to wrap up in the next hour and a half 2 days of ideas and projects for the post-pandemic future from the country where the pandemic first hit in Europe. I'm speaking from my personal newsroom, which is also my bedroom here in Milan, which is the place I visited the most in the last 10 months since the first Italian case was found in a town which is 30 minutes drive from here. I'm the bureau chief of Bloomberg News in Milan. As you can imagine, our job was very much covering the pandemic and the economic impact on the pandemic. The pandemic had an impact on all our lives. We paid a dramatic price. Italy just passed the UK as the country in Europe with most coronavirus linked debt, and obviously also our, the economy here paid the consequences too. Today we are having some good news coming also on the Europe front, because the vaccine is being rolled out and hopefully may be rolled out also in continental Europe next week, as we are going to spend a lockdown holiday season. So let's start with the panel. I think that the topic of our final session is clearly one of the crucial aspects of the post-pandemic world. We'll discuss a shared vision and cooperative leadership for Europe and for the world to a new financial order and new multilateral cooperation. So a very, very important and deep aspect of the world we are facing after this incredible, for several aspects, 2020. So I'll give the floor now to Mark Sobel, who doesn't need many presentations, veteran U.S. Treasury official, and sits in the advisory committee of the Council of the Bretton Woods Committee, for the opening remarks.
Thank you, Tommaso. I'm greatly honored to be here with this outstanding conference to speak on behalf of the Bretton Woods Committee. To kick off the session, I've been asked to offer perspectives on US-EU cooperation on global economic and financial issues and transatlantic relations, particularly with the new US administration taking the reins of power. For transatlantic relations, the news is highly positive. Relations will drastically improve. The tone will be much better. The US will view Europe per tradition as one of our closest partners, sharing our values, and as a foundation for a community of democracy, security, and prosperity. President-elect Biden and his team are committed transatlanticists. They will back the core elements of the US-EU partnership: liberal democracy, support for the European Union, NATO, international financial institutions, and the rule of law. They will put America first by renewing multilateralism. They will work with Europe in rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, remaining in the WHO, and seeking to reinstate the Iran nuclear deal. They will be inclined to support economic openness rather than a retreat into bilateralism and protectionism. The new Secretary of the Treasury is a highly experienced American financial diplomat. She's long attended G7, G20 finance gatherings, as well as IMF meetings. Her instincts will be to support fiscal expansion, given the depth of the crisis and low debt service costs. She'll support openness in trade and sound financial regulation. She'll be smarter and more multilateral in using financial sanctions. The Treasury will do its part in bearing down on climate issues and tackling inequality. But we shouldn't delude ourselves either. Slow-moving subsurface tectonic forces are at play across the globe. They will help shape European and American destinies. Europe long ago achieved prosperity, and the Cold War ended, impacting America's military presence in Europe and Europe's need for security guarantee. Since the global financial crisis, the world has witnessed increasing populism, fears of technological change and globalization, and slow growth. Europe and America have not been exempt. The outlook for sustained growth in the 2020s wasn't cheery to begin with, given demography, lower productivity, stall speed, secular stagnation, or however one calls it. COVID has worsened the situation, even if a vaccine comes to the rescue. European and US cooperation is part of the path to prosperity, but the work begins at home. While American multilateralism will be renewed, I expect America's priority focus to be domestic, as captured by the president-elect's mantra of build back better. We face enormous challenges at home. We need to focus on fiscal efforts to overcome the near-term crisis impacts, build infrastructure, tackle inequality, and improve educational opportunities and worker skills to make all Americans more accepting of globalization, trade, and technological change. Europe, too, faces its own period of introspection. How much weight should be accorded the supranational versus the national level? What will Brexit mean? After COVID and the Next Generation Fund, will European nations go back to business as usual or move closer towards fiscal union? What will Europe do to strengthen its economic foundations? With the growth of China and many emerging markets, especially in Asia, America's relative economic weight has declined, even if we still account for over a fifth of global GDP. Europe's relative weight has also fallen, and underlying growth is modest, with many asking whether Europe is being Japanified. China's economic rise, accompanied by expanding global influence, increasing authoritarianism, aggression, and technological prowess, mean America will be heavily focused on Asia. Dealing with China will be the top American foreign policy priority. This is all occurring at a time when America has wanted to decrease its global footprint. So what does this mean for US-European economic and financial cooperation? The outlook is positive but challenging. If the US and Europe work together, we can lead on multilateralism. The examples abound. First and foremost, we need to work together to pose a common front to the harmful aspects of China's rise, including on economic issues, such as smart investment screening, addressing technological challenges to national security, tackling unfair Chinese industrial policies and abuses of firms. We can work closely in the G7, G20, and IMF, as well as on WTO reform. Indeed, I've proposed that the president-elect, working with this year's Italian G20 presidency, should call an early extraordinary G20 leaders summit to tackle the economic fallout from the COVID crisis. Our central banks work closely together, but monetary policy's impact wanes at the zero lower bound. The US and Europe need new fiscal thinking to support monetary policy in restoring growth to our economies. The US and Europe house the world's largest financial institutions. There's much to be done in reducing financial stability risks. COVID has hit many emerging markets and poor countries hard. Many face lost tourism inflows, lower commodity prices, and reduced remittances, while confronting higher social spending and less revenue. The US and Europe can help ensure that the IMF, World Bank, and other global institutions appropriately disperse resources. Here, inroads are needed in ensuring that non-traditional official creditors, such as China, provide debt relief and reduction if needed for sustainability, as our countries have done for decades through the Paris Club. The US and Europe also should be able to work well together on cybersecurity and fighting money laundering. But again, we shouldn't underestimate the challenges. The US and Europe have significant differences. Europe will be skittish about fully embracing American views on China given the strength of US sentiment across the political spectrum and Europe's own and at times differing geopolitical and economic self-interests. And then you add to that privacy, digital tax, competition law and the FANGs, Boeing, Airbus, trade and tariffs, Nord Stream 2, etc. If we can't manage these tensions, that will cast doubt upon progress on transatlantic relations. So there's much positive across the board in the outlook for transatlantic relations. Indeed, the story is highly welcoming, but we will need to roll up our sleeves and work closely together to overcome our differences in the spirit of realism if we are to secure the benefits. And so I should quit there so we can turn things over to the wonderful Antoinette, Sayeh, and the outstanding panel. Thank you.
Hello, sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Mark, for this introduction. You brought up so many, interesting aspects to discuss that we may stay 24 hours on the panel. Shaping the future of the globe is not an easy game. Let's see, and it's a great pleasure to introduce Antoinette to see and to hear the point of view of the International Monetary Fund. So let's go directly again to the US, to Antoinette Sayeh, who is Deputy Managing Editor of the IMF, who is going to give us the keynote speech of this session.
Thank you so very much, Tommaso, for the introduction. Thank you to the Federation, of course, for inviting me to speak at this session today. Big thank you and hello to Mark, who is a cherished former colleague, and it's great to join him here with this distinguished group today. So buon pomeriggio in my bad Italian to all of you. A very good afternoon to everyone. So today I'd like to speak about what the International Monetary Fund sees as priorities to building a stronger recovery from the crisis, and how international cooperation is at the heart of our shared vision. As we gather virtually, the global economy has started to climb back from the depths of the COVID-19 crisis, but the resurgence in infections is delaying our recovery. It is a powerful reminder that we cannot achieve a sustainable recovery anywhere unless we defeat the pandemic everywhere. Which is why our first priority must be to bring the health crisis under control. The good news is the significant progress on vaccines, which raises our hopes. What we need now is continued international cooperation on the manufacturing, purchase, and distribution of vaccines to ensure all countries, including poorer ones, have access to vaccines, treatments, and tests. The IMF estimates that if we share the progress on medical solutions quickly and widely, we can add almost $9 trillion to global income over the next 5 years. This will have the added benefit of helping to address the income gap between poorer and richer nations at a time when inequality and divergence between countries is set to increase. Europe has shown the way in this regard. To encourage the swift development of safe and effective vaccines, the European Commission made advanced purchases to finance upfront development and ensure rapid deployment to the EU population. And we welcome the recent announcement that the EU has increased its contribution to COVAX to secure vaccines for low and middle income countries. The G20 countries have also indicated that they will strive for affordable and equitable access to drugs, tests, and vaccines for people around the world. But while a medical solution to the crisis may now be in sight, the economic path ahead remains uncertain and prone to setbacks. In the first phase of the crisis, the world undertook unprecedented and synchronized fiscal and monetary actions that put a floor under the world economy. Now, with the pandemic continuing to exact a heavy health and economic toll, fiscal policy support in some parts of the world is waning. Lifelines such as cash transfers to households, job retention support, and augmented unemployment benefits have expired or set to expire this month. This crisis has the potential of imposing lasting scars. Think about dislocated workers, idle skills, investments on hold, new technology on standby. Now, given this gravity, our second priority must be to maintain these income lifelines and prevent cascading bankruptcies. The member countries of the EU in particular showed strong solidarity and cooperation by taking decisive steps to help households and firms cope with lost revenue and income. The historic Next Generation EU Recovery Package, if implemented effectively, could provide a meaningful boost to growth across the EU, helping speed recoveries and expand productive capacity. It will also help mitigate long-term scarring and serve as a backdrop to the recovery from the crisis. Of course, we recognize that the pandemic has also battered economies, leaving record levels of debt. This is particularly challenging for low-income countries that already have very limited fiscal space. We must take urgent action to support these countries, giving them access to more grants, concessional loans, and debt relief. Here too, actions by the G20 countries have been notable. The Debt Service Suspension Initiative, or the DSSI, has given many low-income countries a temporary cushion. And the recently agreed common framework aims to address unsustainable sovereign debt in these countries and ensure broad participation of creditors with fair burden sharing. As we take these steps to navigate our way out of this unprecedented crisis, we must also put in place policies that not only strengthen our recovery in the short term, but ensure that we build solid foundations for a more sustainable and inclusive global economy in the years ahead. Which is why the IMF is calling for a synchronized push for green and digital infrastructure investment once the pandemic starts to come under control. Our research has shown that if G20 countries with the largest fiscal space were to simultaneously increase infrastructure spending by 0.5% of GDP in 2021 and 1% of GDP in the following years, and those G20 economies with more constrained fiscal space were to invest only 1/3 of that, global GDP would increase by close to 2% by 2025. We estimate that they could spend 1/3 less to achieve the same outcome than if they acted alone. This would be particularly significant for Europe. We know that infrastructure gaps are sizable across Central and Eastern Europe, and even within the group of 15 advanced EU members, there is wide variation in infrastructure. We also know that for each percentage point of GDP spent on infrastructure in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe countries, long-term output could increase by 2 to 2.5%. The dividend would be even larger if this infrastructure were to improve connectivity across regions and countries, thereby reducing trade costs as envisaged by the 3Cs initiative. But there is another significant benefit of green and digital investments. They will help us build the foundation of a 21st century economy. Take the example of investments in efficient mass transit systems and smart electricity grids. These are key to start tackling the most consequential challenge facing humanity, that is climate change. We estimate that a combination of green investments and appropriate carbon pricing can put us on the path towards net zero emissions by mid-century and help create millions of new jobs. Similarly, sectors have been the biggest winners Similarly, we know that the economy of the future will be digital. Related sectors have been the biggest winners of the pandemic crisis. We must enable this transition by investing in digital infrastructure. Think about e-commerce, e-learning, e-government. At the same time, such investment must also include support for workers as they transition from shrinking to expanding sectors. Increased investment in training, reskilling, and high quality education will have to be pivotal to unlock the potential of the digital economy. And more broadly, a more fundamental rethink of how to adapt labor market policies to respond to accelerating automation and to facilitate green and digital transformation may be needed. The benefits are clear. These investments will invigorate growth, which is why we support the next generation's EU's emphasis on accelerating green and digital transformation. But the overall growth impact of the next generation EU plan will also depend on the progress countries make on structural reforms, for instance, in health and education systems. The linking of funds to progress on implementing the EU's country-specific recommendations will help ensure that the recovery effort serves as a catalyst rather than a substitute for necessary reforms. So let me close by recognizing that these are, of course, also the priorities of the Italian G20 presidency, which focuses on people by tackling inequalities, on the planet by implementing the commitments to the Paris Climate Agreement, and on prosperity by empowering people to fully participate in a digital society. This is an ambitious agenda, but we have a once in a lifetime, once in a century opportunity to build forward better. Simply returning to the low growth and high inequality economy of the past is no longer an option. Each of us in our roles can help shape this recovery and build forward on the basis of this shared vision. Our success depends on us acting swiftly and acting together. Certainly hope I can count on your support as that the IMF very much look forward to working collectively to achieve this vision. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Antoinette, for your speech, who raised some of the main topics we're going to discuss during a roundtable, which we are going to start right now. I mean, you said this is one in a century opportunity, which is a good way to look at things, especially after such a difficult year. So we really think, that's the way to look forward to see after this tremendous 2020, to look at the opportunities which are in front of us. I'm going now to introduce you the speakers of the panel that we're gonna host. I'm not sure if I have to go back to Rome before starting the panel. No, here we go.
Tommaso, may I introduce from...
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, Tommaso, just to introduce Mr. Bernard Spitz, who's with us today in Rome studio, and he will join the panel, and he will be with us today in the Rome studio. It's an exception, but we are very proud to make such an exception for Bernard Spitz. So just to tell you that the floor is yours now from Milan, and thanks to our prestigious Max Sobel and Antoinette Monsio Sayeh for the speeches. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours, Tommaso.
Thank you very much. I hope next year I can join you down in Rome. Distance has never been such a matter that even in our country, like in the last 10 months, we have, discovered again that, distance matter because of the pandemic. One of the few of the other things, we have changed in the last 10 months in the way we do business, and we, as Antoinette and said in her speech, there will be winner and loser. Clearly, tech companies are gonna be a winner of the new world, or how we can call it, after the pandemic. And it shows, this great panel. We are virtually connected, but it allows us, to be connected from all over the world in one place and discuss such important topics. The possibility was here before, was never used so much as we are doing right now. Even if I think we all prefer at the end of the day, to be in person, but it allows us really, to do efficiently some stuff that we used to do in person maybe. Months ago, many traveled. Clearly, the travel industry is one of the one who's suffering most, because we are changing our habits. Anyway, I'll stop here because I can talk for hours, but I'm not an expert of anything. I'm just a journalist, so I really would like to introduce the expert now. We saw them in a picture a few minutes ago. We're gonna have Pier Virgilio Dastoli, chairman of European Movement in Italy. Then we're gonna have José Manuel Gonzalez-Paramo, former member of the ECB Executive Board, who teaches at the IESE Business School. We have Maria Chiara Malaguti, president of Unidrot. Antonio Parenti is going to join us, head of the European Commission representation in Italy. Bernard Spitz is in Rome. I come back to him later. And Nicolas Veron, senior fellow Bruegel and Peterson Institute. We are going to discuss, some of the aspects that are left by this the new transatlantic cooperation, the multilateralism. Many things have changed in the last few months. As in the opening remarks, Mark was saying, obviously the new U.S. administration clearly can be a changing point for some multilateral matters, but also the fact that Italy is hosting the G20, and physically Italy is just on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea from Africa. And so I would like to leave the floor to Pier Virgilio Dastoli, who maybe have something to tell us about, the importance also of this part of the world and in relation to the G20.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much to PEBAF for this invitation. I saw that you found
easy to understand him.
A photo of me of a summer photo that is a good perspective. And thank you very much for this invitation. I hope, and I'm sure, that next year we will organize ourselves in presence and not in a visual conference. I would raise 2 points in my speech. One point concerning the G20 and the presidents of Italy, and the second point concerning the implementation of the next generation EU. Concerning the G20, you know that Italy will chair the G20 for this year, next year. The G20, as you know, is a jumble of liberal democracies and totalitarian states, of free market system and countries where the state capitalism prevails, of economies coming from years and years of industrial development and product systems of new industrialization, of countries engaged in the respect of the sustainable development goals, and states very far to the objective of a free carbon society. All the debates that have been without tangible results, the planet is paying the non-respect of the step-by-step implementation of the Agenda 2030, and between the 20s, nobody has had the idea to put again on the agenda the question of the reform of the United Nations Security Council. If we would relaunch a global governance founded on the principle of multilateralism by rotating it around the 3 P, people, planet, and prosperity, it is necessary to start with the main objective: nobody left behind. In view of the G20, the think tank are diffusing a globe where the members of the network are indicated by different colors, following their status as full members, permanent observers, or special guests. What strikes a geopolitical eye is the lack of the 55 states of the African Union, with the only exception of South Africa, in a summit where the participants will discuss about the social effects of digitalization climate change, sustainable energy resources, the international trade, the transnational terrorism, at last but not least, the fight against pandemics in view of sustainable, fair, and resilient recovery. Each point of the G20 agenda contains a question that will remain without answer from the leaders concerning all the 5 continents and related to the epochal phenomenon of the migration movements, bound to grow because of the effects of the climate change, the social consequences of the pandemics, and the international trade more and more less fair and supportive. The question of the world governance of the migration movements shouldn't be separated to the human dignity right, which is trampled in many countries of the G20. All these arguments for us confirm the necessity to invite the African Union as such to the G20 that will take place in Bari at the end of next October on the presidency of Italy. That is my first point. Second point concerning the implementation of the next generation EU. The European movement in Italy is part of a consortium addressing blockchain and citizen-centric finance. In our opinion, after the greening of the European Union Treaty, the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and the social principles, now is the time to take a major step towards a new development model, an inclusive and sustainable finance scheme that seeks out community participants, supported by an ecosystem of blockchains for a winning organizing system in the digital age. To implement decisions related to the next generation EU, public authorities will need a new form of leadership and empowerment. In order to make a leap in societal capabilities, we will need to deal with sustainable in a holistic manner, addressing cost-cutting issues related to finance, biodiversity, climate, inequality, and health. The organizing framework should be a multi-stakeholder, open method of coordination towards systematic change to build resiliency and regeneration supported by new tools such as blockchain. As far as Italy is concerned, should be part of a digital investment plan in the framework of the recovery and resilience plan in line with the United Nations Task Force recommendation to create a virtuous trust cycles in public finance. We would be very much interested to engage a conversation with the financial institutions, public and private, in particular as far as blended capital is concerned. And in this framework, we will organize an international seminar the 27th of January discussing about this question of blockchain. In the framework of Europe's geopolitical role, this blockchain and public funds initiative to support the implementation of sustainable development goals should be presented at international forums such as G20 in Italy, COP26 in United Kingdom, as at the Africa-European Union Summit, and at the United Nations Food System Summit. By doing so, Europe will harness sustainable and fintech to secure the implementation of its own objectives, build trust and create value for society, as well as to catch up with the fintech digital leading initiative of other parts of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the interesting remarks, and also for pointing out some of the aspects that, in the view of new multilateral cooperation, should take into account. I'm now giving the floor to José, who I see. Yeah, I see him connected. José, we had the lucky of having already some interesting point of view in the light of a shared vision to get to a new multilateral cooperation. Why in this new era, and we'll somehow see starting a sort of new era for many reasons. Hopefully the pandemic may come to an end. The new U.S. administration, Brexit, clearly it's a might be a change of era event. Why do you see still the important and necessary multilateralism?
Well, first of all, let me thank again the organizers. This is, I think, the 7th time I join you. It's always a pleasure. On top of it, with the bonus of going to Rome, which is not going to be the case this year, but I don't lose hopes. But my 7th participation, the 6 previous ones were related to financial matters, maybe because of my background as a former central banker in the board of the ECB or in the board of Bank of Spain, and also later by my profile as a board member of a private global bank. But on this occasion, I'm not going to talk about finance. I think there are competent colleagues here, including Nicola, that will deal with them perfectly, and I'm ready, of course, to participate in the discussion later. But today, after the vote of the people in the US and the electoral college vote yesterday, I think it's better to talk about the new, perhaps once in a lifetime opportunity to redesigning the transatlantic agenda. Now I am putting on the hat of the European chair of the Transatlantic Business Council, which I occupy since a number of years, and also a member of the advisory committee of the Bretton Woods committee, and in the same way as Mark Sobel is. So we are two of us today, Mark. Let me make 2 broad points which are very closely related together. First, Bretton Woods, and this is one of the hats I bring today. I think these institutions were created long ago, more than 70 years ago, in 44, before the World War II ended. In the case of the World Bank and the IMF, a bit later was created the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade in 47, which is the predecessor of the World Trade Organization created in 95. These institutions shared the multilateralism and the rules-based approach to trade and finance, and of course, balance on payments issues and monetary and financial stability. These institutions, of course, with all the multilateral institutions, not related to economics, including NATO, the World Health Organization, United Nations, and so on and so forth, are really one of the biggest explanations why we have had more than 70 years of growth, expansion, trade, reduction of poverty, and peace, in broadly speaking, not global conflict. Now, the 2008 crisis resulted in an institutional innovation, which was the creation of the G20. Now, the G20, which covers 2/3 of the world population, 75% of trade, and 85% of global GDP, is a grouping, very important grouping, acting through Bretton Woods institutions, among others. I think the Bretton Woods, and I am not speaking on behalf of the Bretton Woods, but this is what encourages me to participate in it, is committed to help promote the same values it was promoting since the origin, since the very beginning of these institutions, because I think we need them today more than ever. So promoting the understanding that we need to rebuild an open, rules-based international system, which has been damaged somewhat over the last years. We, I think, are also committed to advocate in the key multilateral institutions in front of the many stakeholders that are not keenly aware of the importance of those, including politicians, academics, and the private sector participants. And of course, it takes also some effort to try to produce input that could be useful to the IMF, to the World Bank, to the WTO, and so on, in order to make these institutions more effective in their very difficult task. And examples of issues where I think we could help is providing suggestions as to global crisis prevention, or how to enlarge the central bank cross-currency facilities that today are quite constrained to a few central banks, what to do about IMF quotas, which is always delayed and very difficult, the problems of global debt, and so on and so forth. So this is what I wanted to say about the Bretton Woods institutions. But for Bretton Woods institutions, which are global in reach and ambition, to function properly and effectively in harnessing opportunities, I think that stability and growth relies upon a healthy, open, and dynamic transatlantic relationship, as was implied at the beginning. So given, I think, the historical, political, institutional, and idiosyncratic links between the US and the European Union, I think we have now in front of us a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reinvigorate the transatlantic axis. I think the enormity of the threats and the challenges is difficult to exaggerate, and those demand truly global relationship. And I think US and the European Union together still have the weight and the capacity to make a difference. It's 1/3 of global GDP, almost 1/3 of the population, is 1 billion people, 60% of FDA, a huge amount of also external aid in terms of trade is still dominant. And so it can make a difference as to how to tackle many global problems, including global humanitarian disasters associated to health, and we are living through one, immigration, refugees, terrorism, nuclear proliferation, armed conflict, China, and I don't put any adjectives, more inclusive global governance, kickstarting growth, employment, sustainability, post-COVID health arrangements, or reinvigorating the model of shared values and beliefs in freedom, democracy, human rights, initiative, competition. So we face a great, but possibly the last opportunity to write the rules of global governance. The European Commission, as you may know, has put in writing a proposal of an agenda to start discussing in the first half of 2021 with the European Union authorities, the main areas where there are common interests, in order to use in full our joint leverage, namely health. So COVID is not over. For COVID to be over, at least to a large extent, we need tests, we need vaccines, we need to distribute them globally. And beyond COVID, there will be health threats that are better tackled joining forces. Second threat is sustainability, climate and biodiversity. And it's good news that the US is rejoining the Paris Agreement, but now there are, I think, opportunities for both of us to make an effort together. For instance, as regards the pricing of carbon and border adjustments associated to it, or research and development linked to new technologies for carbon capture and storage. Third area is technology, trade, and standards. I think that there are huge technological threats, artificial intelligence, 5G, transfer of data, but also rules governing trade and investment that required, again, reviving some kind of common understanding. And finally, of course, democracy and human rights. President Biden has made a proposal that I think in Europe has a lot of nodding, which is a summit for democracy. This summit of democracy should take place, in my view, as soon as possible. But to sum up, the challenges today are immense. In order to tackle them, we need strong, rejuvenated institutions and rules. And the Bretton Woods institutions are a part of this. A strong and open dynamic transatlantic relationship is a sine qua non ingredient for this to happen. So now, with a more assertive and capable European Union and a new US administration from January 21, we have the window of opportunity opening, perhaps for the last time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, José, who made clear that the tasks are immense, but there is also, one of the he called it the last opportunity to write the rules of the global cooperation. This, gives some sort of urgency to the matter we are discussing today. Let me go to Maria Chiara Malaguti. She's professor and president of the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law. One of the aspects, Maria Chiara, to be considered is the reform of the investment legal environment, but also we have seen the way countries are protecting national industries in this new environment. The so-called national champions, even inside Europe. There's probably a lot to be discussed about it.
Yeah, thank you, Tommaso. I must say that, in fact, I heard so many things that now I have to try to focus on a few, because I heard a lot of provocation. I mean, a lot of things I would like to be able to discuss. I wanted to focus on direct investments, and I wanted to do so because I think this is one of the elements in the political agenda, extremely sensitive, with many different, sometimes even inconsistent elements. So I will tell you a few things that I consider of interest, but just to connecting what I try to say with what I heard until now, I would say that COVID COVID taught us to discuss much more, of course, also of international governance. Someone indeed asked for new Bretton Woods era, new era in the sense of the same spirit of Bretton Woods, of course, renewed because the situation had changed, but getting back to the same atmosphere and the same political willingness of cooperating. But also, we have also seen that we spoke a lot of public interest. We spoke a lot of public goods, saying that vaccines, for instance, are public good. So there has to be a renewal of concepts that now need to be put in a context. And all of this comes in a time where the role of the private sector is essential. So I think it's my direct investment consideration should be linked to the role of the private sector in all what we discussed. And the reason why I say that COVID showed it, because if you go to the strategy of the European Union, the one that was already commented, you see that over there are clear partnership between public and the private, because the public sector does finance the private sector, but the private sector holds responsible for a number of goals and targets that need to be reached. So it is a new understanding, in my view, of the relationship between private and public. But saying so, I'm aware of a number of inconsistencies in the way this works. So of course, there is a lot to be done on that. And we also should reconsider some of the agreements on multilateralism that we have, simply because the trade and the way to address these issues has changed. So let me start really with a few points, and then if you need, we can go back to them. If you find them interesting, we can discuss them better. In the first place, now we do have shared visions among many of the players, but we don't use for the most multilateral schemes any longer. The European Union is building up its trade policy, all in FTA, in free trade agreements. One is CETA, that you know very well. The other one, it's expected, it's hoped to start again with the US, with the new administration, which is the TTP. There are many in Asia. And what is the point with that? The European Union has many regional treaties that join regional entities with the same principles, because the European Union has the same agenda against and together with all its partners, but these shared points are not implemented in a multilateral way as it would be under the old schemes. But it's fragmented because, of course, you apply different FTA, even with the same content, not necessarily 100% the same content, but inevitably applied in different regions. So this is a different way. There is shared vision and there is cooperative leadership, exactly like before, but under a different structure and a different way to govern and to have governance. So we should somehow take this into consideration. Together with this, as Tommaso, you were mentioning, some regions have new policies, for instance, on screening on direct investments. So you do find rules that try to protect their domestic industry. And this, again, is something which is accepted, in fact, as good for the general interest, you know. So once again, you have a new element that it is taken into the picture. What does general interest mean at that point? Is it general interest for a region? Is it general interest for an industry? How do you combine these elements with something like the Belt and Road project of China to indeed make investments? I'm sorry, because I know I'm jumping from one point to another, but the point is there is a different structure which we should consider when we say that there is a new cooperation. There is indeed, I'm totally sure, a new multilateral cooperation. It has some different schemes, in my understanding, in the way it works. And the role of private sector is fundamental either way. On the one side, you have mechanisms that protect direct investments by investment arbitration that might collide, that might clash with some general policies. One example for all, and I'm sure is very well known to Professor Gonzalez-Paramo, because some investors started investment arbitration against Greece and Cyprus, attacking the troika restructuring of the public debt. So you have what is considered to be a general interest and the possibility by the private sector through investment arbitration to attack those schemes because their personal interests were damaged, were challenged. On the other side, the private sector is fundamental also in positive, let's say, in the sense that all sustainable development principles put a high responsibility on the private sector, and the private sector takes that responsibility also to implement general interests and general principles. So you do have a situation where you have a different kind of, I would say, governance, or a different kind of multilateralism with different schemes. You have a role of the private sector that you were not used to have in the past, that is not new, it is not coming with the COVID or nothing to do, it comes from decades of development. And you do have a responsibility now, a clear responsibility of the private sector, with some inconsistencies, inevitably inconsistency, because there is a different way to combine different stakeholders' interests. So in my understanding, we are indeed in a period of shared visions, cooperative leadership, in a situation of emergency where we all seem ready to finally take in consideration the desperate need to cooperate, but there are some differences in the circumstances, that in the way the governance can build up, that needs to be tackled and considered. So I think what I would like to try to put on the table from my side, I mean, UNIDROIT is indeed, as you said, an international organization, one of the oldest in the world. We believe 100% on multilateralism, but there is some adjustment that need to be done in the way to understand this, especially because of the role of the private sector. And if you allowed me to finish with one thing, this is fundamental in my understanding in the financial market. I worked for the ECB. I was simply a staff of the ECB at the very beginning. But already at that time, the mechanism of the issue of territorial regulation of financial markets showed its limitation, in the sense that now we all know that the FSB and the G20 have in their agenda cross-border payments, because you cannot, now the financial market is really 100%, in particular because of the platforms and blockchains, global. But global in the sense that you do not have any territory. Until now, we were saying that you had some issues with cross-border phenomena. Now the issue is the world is really global. There is no territory to which you can link a blockchain. I'm sorry, because I probably took too many points into the debate, but I hope you could still make sense of what I tried to say. Thank you.
Grazie. Thank you very much. My takeaway, from my journalistic takeaway from all the things you said, which I found particularly interesting, is there's a shared vision, and maybe the pandemic and the emergency help talks. There's a desperate need to cooperate and mimic what the CEO, which I've passed for 10 years, used to say. The key point of everything is execution. So it looks like we have a shared vision, but an execution plan of a shared vision is still a matter to discuss. I would say, let me move. I think he joined us, Antonio Parenti. Antonio Parenti is the head of European Commission representation in Italy. We discussed a lot at the beginning. Hello, hi Antonio. I finally see you. Welcome to the panel. We discussed a lot about the role that Europe is going to have in the future of the cooperation, multilateral cooperation. One of the words we have heard more in the last months is clearly the word green. The post-pandemic future is clearly green. Let me make just an example of an industry which I'm quite familiar with. I was referring to the CEO I was pestering for 10 years, the automotive industry, for example. There is clearly such an acceleration of the transition to electric vehicles. Also following the pandemic, there was a big question when the pandemic started, may this delay the transformation of the industry? Actually not. It's going to accelerate it. And this is also because of some point on the European agenda, which is moving, which is accelerating a transition to a new form of mobility. So leaving you the floor now to discuss a bit about this specific part of clearly post-pandemic world where clearly cooperation is necessary. Obviously, the green agenda and then very environmental agenda.
Thank you, Tommaso, and sorry for being late to the panel, but those days are hectic, and I'm glad that at least I could listen to Maria Chiara and her extremely clear and challenging expose. I wanted to go green when you asked me to intervene on this topic, because I naturally thought when it came to shared vision and cooperative leadership for Europe and the world that the green revolution, which is the one we are moving towards, being the first and most important and relevant issue where there's a European leadership, where we need multilateral cooperation to implement it, and especially we need a new financial order. So I thought that would be one of those items which I could find or kind of promote consensus between us, Europe, the world, and the financial world, which has always been challenging in the past and fruitful when happened. Why green? Well, I think that one of the lessons of the pandemic, and one of the indeed, as you, Tommaso, explained a moment ago, accelerators that is coming out of this terrible period, is the moving towards a greener economy. And moving towards a greener economy is an extremely complex system, because it requires a complete overhaul of our economic way of life. It's not simply moving towards an electric car, which would already be a positive element. Is moving to a circular economy, is moving to greener energy, is moving all over the world in this process, and possibly the most coordinated move, the better we're going to be having. I'm saying this because everyone is polluting, not only companies, but also individuals, and not only developed countries, but also developing countries. Because the costs which are involved into this transition, there's going to be huge resistance where among those countries which would move first, avoiding what can be defined as a dumping, an environmental dumping, or competition for countries which do not want to move. You may have well noticed that when the European Commission unveiled its green plan, it was very careful in putting forward also the idea that there's going to be a carbon border adjustment tax for those countries which would not be respecting similar or moving towards a similar idea of carbon neutrality. And I don't think that those idea of duties and levies were the reason for European leadership, but it's clear that we have seen through the leadership of the European Union on the green agenda, especially in the last 4 years, where we were not left alone, but almost so in bearing the torch of a greener future. We have seen in the recent times very important moves around the world, with Japan, South Korea, and even China making pledges which are equal or similar to the one of the European Union, which is getting towards a carbon-free economy by the year 2050 or 2060, our latest has been the case of China. Now, doing so requires, as I was saying, multilateral cooperation. Paris Agreement is one, of course, and it's a very welcome news that the new American administration, Biden administration, has decided to come back to the Paris Agreement. What remains to do is to make sure that throughout multilateral cooperation, those targets which are part of the Paris Agreement, which, let's not forget, are not compulsory on the members of the Paris Agreement itself, are actually respected by all parties. And what is also important is that we move and uplift towards a more greener future, also developing countries. And here I come to the financial system. As I was saying, moving towards a greener world is going to be a real revolution in terms both of production, but also of financing for the production. There is an aspect which is or may be linked to the idea that there is a need for financing to be green, so to look at projects which have an impact which is positive or at worst neutral for the environment. But it's also the very shared need of financing throughout the world this revolution. Europe is putting a lot of money, is really putting the money where its mouth is through the Next Generation EU, which will 37% of it for greener revolution, but there's also the Just Transition Fund, which will help also a number of European countries to move in the same direction. Monies are also being forecasted for technical assistance and help to developing countries, but we need to move, as one of the mantras of the United Nations has been for a long time, from billion to trillion to implement the 2030 agenda, and environment and green future is at the center of that agenda. Now, I think it's in very clear mind of everyone that that result is not achievable without the support of the international financial system. So it will be very important, especially now that the United States is rejoining the fold, and keeping in mind that on that extent, UK has never left the fold, that indeed we are looking at pushing the banking system throughout the world in thinking green when they invest money. And I think it would be an extremely important step forward in a cooperation throughout the world if this is taken up and put forward by the private sector. I know that a lot is being doing. There's been a lot of green bonds which start to be emitted. There's a more and more attention by the private sector to the carbon leakage produced by companies. And those are developments which are very much welcome. I think there is a need to build on these developments to streamline and mainstream them into the way investment are carried out, because I don't think there is a way back towards the world of 2019. We need to move indeed into a new era, and we need to do it together with other member states and together with the private sector, in particular, I think the banking sector. And I would stop here and happy to discuss afterwards.
Thanks, Antonio. Yeah, there's no way back to 2019, and hopefully there won't be another 2020 for some reason. But clearly there are opportunities arising from such a peculiar experience we are all facing. Let me go back to the Rome studio now to hear what Bernard got from all the comments and the speeches we got so far. I mean, there's a lot on the table. Which for you, the more interesting aspect of the debate we had so far?
Thank you, Tommaso, and you were right. Next time you should be in Rome, believe me. Buongiorno a tutti, bonjour, welcome to all. It's obviously a very important debate in these days. We are in the middle of the crisis of the COVID. And what we can say about the COVID crisis is that it has been an accelerator. It has not changed trends, it has accelerated them. It has accelerated strengths and accelerated weaknesses. And this is true for people, individuals, companies, countries, and international organizations. We have an acid test about our capacity to solve our global problem. So if we look back at the stage, at the landscape, On the one hand, we could consider that things are not so bad after all. We have a vaccine in perspective, which is the exit of the big crisis. We have been able at the European level to address the issue on a financial basis. We have created an instrument of multilateralism, of mutualization of the debt for the first time, which was against all odds. We have clarification of the rules of the ECB towards Karlsruhe Court. And on a larger scope, you can consider that what happened in the US, the arrival of the new administration of Biden, and also one way or the other, the end of the Brexit story. All this opens new door. But in fact, this is a part of the truth. It's not all the truth. For instance, seen from the European point of view, you know, maybe losing Trump is not such a good deal, because Trump was some kind of federator of the Europeans. And maybe after him, we don't know which the kind of movement that he could trigger off. Same thing with Brexit. Brexit was push all of us to be unit. And at the end of the game, things could be different. So we are now also to challenge the situation and be able to build things to do, and not only on a defensive way, but on an offensive way. On this side, we know that we have a lot of way to act in Europe, especially. For instance, we can be happy to see the euro, the appreciation of the euro, its role on the planet finance towards the dollar. But in fact, if you look carefully at the statistics, you see that this part of this place for the euro is not in fact so much higher than 10 years ago. It's about 5 years ago. It's just more or less the same. And we don't know what will be the evolution with the digital currencies, the yuan evolution. This is one thing. We have to improve the situation of the European banks, which are still fragile on a global point of view. And we know that the appreciation in terms of value is going down as compared with the American banks. So, in fact, we have, of course, to progress in the way of the European banking union, of the capital market union, all these very clear targets. And we have to also create, I think, a new, and that was part of what before Antoinette or José Manuel were saying, we have to address also that there's a problem of sovereignty, there's the issue of the American extraterritoriality challenge the companies, and this is a big issue in Europe in general, in France and especially. We could talk about the legal privilege issue, which is important. I think that what we need is first some inspiring projects. There is something, I just mentioned it because it's not very famous yet. It's the EPI. I don't know if you know what EPI is. It's European Payment Initiative. And what is at stake is to create an instrument of payment, of digital payment, for the entire Europe, with all the banks of Europe, etc., to be challenging Visa or American Express. And this is a huge, interesting, it's like Airbus, but on the financial background. I think this is a kind of inspiring project. And of course, multilateralism. A lot of people have mentioned Bretton Woods. It's interesting. You know who were the two leaders of Bretton Woods, apart from the American? And on the European side, on the French side, it was Pierre Mendès France, who was a very famous socialist in France, who is very respected among years, and was the father of the modern left, I would say. And in the UK, it was Keynes, Lord Maynard Keynes. So the question was that at that time, there was already, and because it was at the end of World War II, the idea of finding solutions for this never happen again. But Bretton Woods was a very short representation of the world. It was with the winners of the World War II, not the losers, including Japan and Germany, which are part of the top 5 countries in the world today. Of course, there was no developing countries. I mean, most of the planet was out of it, not mentioning all the stakeholders that we have mentioned. So, in fact, since 10 years, there are several companies and groups, including MEDEF in France, since, in fact, the G20 of Cannes in 2011, which have called for a new Bretton Woods. A new Bretton Woods to just be adapted to the world of the 21st century. With the issues of the 21st century, digital was not mentioned at Bretton Woods for obvious reasons, nor environmental issues. And all the problems that we are today facing were absent of Bretton Woods. But the spirit of Bretton Woods is still there. So we have put on the agenda last year in France, in Cannes, in Aix, for the B7 this time, on the agenda the idea of an inclusive Bretton Woods, an inclusive capitalism, an inclusive growth. And the interesting thing is that we have had the support of all the groups of representation of the employers, including the US. And there is one partner that we have not mentioned yet, because when we talk about G20, B20, we forget L20. L20 is L like labor. And this is a social aspect, because obviously the corporate social governance is part of the New Deal that has to come from a new Bretton Woods. It has to be shared between the employers, the workers, and the governments. And of course, I don't forget that next year, the B20, the G20, and the N20 will be in Italy. So I think that for our Italian friends, it is a very, very important thing. And we in France want really to support this, because we think that this is a very important step in the multilateralism answer to the crisis in general and the COVID crisis in particular.
Yes.
So, Tommaso.
Yes. Thanks. You're bringing to the table, much more to discuss. Let's go to first Nicolas and see if then we have time for a short, quick discussion, because I think it would be really great if we can sum up with a couple of ideas from the session to conclude it. But something we have touched but not completely addressed is obviously the financial space, when we were discussing also with José at the beginning the necessity of multilateralism and the Europe part of it. So Nicolas, please, if you can share with us your view on the matter.
Thank you, Tommaso. Thanks to Paolo Garonna and all the organizers. Unlike José Manuel, I don't think I can say this is my 7th time on this forum, but I've been here several times and very grateful for the opportunity to exchange in this context, even so I miss Rome this year as well. I think before narrowing it down to the financial sector, I would like to come back to the question of, what will the world remember of 2020 in terms of multilateralism and global institutions. Of course, it's too early to tell. And at this point, I think most of us have a dark view of 2020. It was not a good year. But I think it's also important to take a step back and ask ourselves what were the bigger picture things that emerged in this year of darkness. One is scientific cooperation. The response to the crisis has not been ideal, but the fact that we have a vaccine now approved in an rapidly increasing number of jurisdictions is a triumph for science. It's a triumph for medicine. Less than 1 year after the virus appeared. And it's hard to overestimate the international efforts that went through this, largely channeled through private sector organizations. And here I echo what Maria Chiara told us. I mean, Pharmaceuticals firms largely are international organizations these days. And if you look at, for example, where vaccine tests have been performed, this is all over the place. But also in terms of public health organizations cooperating through the World Health Organizations, benchmarking practices, adopting practices from each other. Now, I know there's been a lot of emphasis on the transatlantic relationship today so far, but if you look at this from a global perspective, Europe and the US are not the best practices here. The striking thing, and it pains me to say it as a firm believer in the superiority of democratic institutions, is that the best response has been in East Asia, irrespective of regime, and China actually has had a response which is as good as any other, strikingly so given the size of the country, which is even more striking when you remember that they were the first to have to respond. And they did it broadly right in a way that neither Europe nor the US can pretend to have done. So the transatlantic space basically was left behind in terms of the health policy response, but I don't think it was left behind in terms of the vaccine research, and that's something to celebrate. If you look at trade, what has this year brought in terms of trade negotiations? Here again, actually taking a step back, you see Asia ahead and Europe and the US catching up in terms of the new developments. RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, has been poo-pooed in the US because the US was not part of it, largely ignored in Europe, but it's the world's largest trade deal ever. It's a shallow deal. It's not as deep as other trade agreements that Europe and the US have been part of, but it's a very big deal. And it has structural consequences, including in terms of the mental map that people in Asia will have of their world, with now ASEAN and China and Japan brought together in one single organization, which will establish a secretariat and have its own organizational and institutional life. Similarly, the fact that China, RCEP is largely an ASEAN-driven process, but China has taken a lot of leadership in that process and is now taking leadership at the highest level to signal willingness to join the CPTPP, the Comprehensive Partnership of the Transatlantic, comprehensive and whatever, I forget the acronym, CPTPP. And there's been nothing of the same nature in the transatlantic space. So let's not forget that. Not to say nothing has happened that's good for multilateralism in Asia, in Europe and the US. Of course, the US with the Biden presidency is back to multilateralism, and that's great. In Europe, well, I should say the EU and the UK. In the EU, the first meaningful step towards fiscal union with the next generation EU is extremely significant. The fact that Brexit is happening in an orderly way is also, I guess, a qualified success. But still, I mean, the picture is not one of transatlantic leadership of the world, and I think it's not self-evident at all. And here I would perhaps somewhat qualify what we have heard earlier in this panel and in the keynotes, that the transatlantic relationship is what will define the next era from a global perspective. So having said that, let me focus on the financial space for a few minutes. And again, look at what lessons we learned and what we can look ahead to in terms of 2020 and the next few years. I think in terms of lessons learned, I will highlight three. And sorry if I speak a little bit of jargon here, but after all, this is a financial federation of Italy, and so you will hopefully forgive me. Basel III has been spectacularly vindicated by the pandemic sequence. So as you know, many people, including many bankers, were skeptical that Basel III was overkill, capital levels that were too high, inefficient economically. Thanks goodness we had Basel III. Thanks goodness we entered the COVID-19 crisis with the capital levels, the increased capital levels with more robust capital, more loss-absorbing capital that Basel III mandated. And I think this is something that in the financial sector policy space, we need to celebrate and we need to remember. So there are many discussions that are relevant here. Maybe we'll come back to them in the Q&A. More jargon, expected credit loss provisioning. In the European Union, of course, that's in IFRS 9. In the US, it's CECL, as they call it. It has stood the test of COVID-19. COVID-19 being a very unexpected massive shock was not what expected loss provisioning was designed for. But the fact that the EU, in my view, has successfully managed the implementation of that standard without disruption and while mitigating the possible pro-cyclical effects of it in the circumstances of COVID-19, I think suggests that introducing that standard was the right thing to do. It works even in circumstances which are not really the ones for which it has been introduced. And that's another lesson to remember. Third one, the single supervisory mechanism. The SSM, the fact that the ECB is now the supervisor for Eurozone banks, has gotten its first crisis test this year. And I would argue it has passed it spectacularly well. Basically, imagine a Eurozone in which we wouldn't have had the SSM this year. We would have had the classic collective action problem of every supervisor trying to pretend that their banks were in better shape than the neighbors, not taking action, not wanting to stigmatize their banks, and therefore not providing what the SSM did provide, which was both a welcome capital relief, which was not fully used by the banks, and we can discuss that, but was very important to avoid the perceptions that banks would be tight in terms of capital in general. And second, mandating measures of capital conservation, which I'm aware have been unpopular in the banking community. I'm talking about the dividend ban here, but I think we're very reassuring in terms of the banks conserving their capital and maintaining enough capital to go through the pandemic. And until last month, it was not clear that this would be enough. It was not clear that the banks would, in using a metaphor that the ECB has used a lot, be able to cross the desert of the COVID-19 crisis. But now with the prospect of a vaccine being deployed in 2021, I think it is increasingly likely that indeed the Eurozone banking sector will be able to cross that desert, with maybe a few exceptions, but manageable ones. I think the ECB also has given no indication of excessive forbearance. Those of you who follow the situation at Piraeus Bank, for example, know what I'm talking about in Greece. And therefore, I think beyond the fact that the banking sector, to use a cliche, has been part of the solution rather than the problem, I think we need to acknowledge that the SSM works as intended. It's much better than the previous framework, including in situations of unexpected massive crisis. To conclude, looking ahead, Antoinette Sayeh reminded us that it's important to build infrastructure, and I agree. And in the financial sector, this means building institutions, and not just institutions in Europe, but also global institutions, which I think are needed at both levels. And when I mean institutions, I mean effective, independent public organizations that help build the banking union, the capital markets union, as Bernard Spitz reminded us, but also a sustainable global vision for financial integration that sustains financial stability, but doesn't revert back to financial protectionism. In Europe, and without having time to develop, I think this means at least three things. One is anti-money laundering, on which there is significant policy momentum, and I think Mark Sobel talked about it. In Europe now, we have the opportunity to finally get our AML house in order, at least in terms of AML supervision of the financial sector. And I think it's very important that the right decisions are made in 2021 on this. As you know, the European Commission will introduce proposed legislation in the first half of 2021, and I view that as a very important step to complement the institutional landscape. The second one is market supervision. I think between us, we can say is that people talk about capital markets union, but not much has happened. If we want capital markets union to become a reality, the indispensable catalyst is a stronger, more credible, more independent European market supervisor. And here I should mention that as an independent non-executive board member of the trade repository arm of DTCC, I am on the receiving end of ESMA supervision. So I'm not talking in this capacity, but I think it is clear to all practitioners that to become a really independent and respected supervisor, ESMA needs reform and also expansion of its mandate, but reform of its governance and funding in particular. And the third one, of course, is the completion of the banking union, which in practice means creating effective institutions at the European level for resolution and deposit insurance. The Single Resolution Board, of course, is the basis for that. But as we know, it's a halfway house and it requires very meaningful legislative reform if it is to be made to work. Now, at the global level, and because I'm already speaking a bit too long, I will stop there. I think we cannot dream of the same level of institutional integration, right? We cannot have global banking supervision. I think we could have global supervision of some financial firms, but that's still a pretty utopian proposition at this point. What I think we should aim at is a much more seamlessly integrated system at the global level for financial system information. And here I mean market data, corporate data, and also to a certain extent banking data. And there are elements of this here and there, but I think we should be much more ambitious if we want to support global stability in the next phase of multilateralism. Thank you very much. I'll stop there for the debate.
Thank you, Nicola. Let me ask in Rome if we have time for a couple of follow-up, because we, the discussion went now to almost the end of our time. Gianni, can we have a couple of follow-up?
Yes, you have.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Which is a claim that we remember from some years ago. So please raise your hand who wants to jump in. And it was quite provocative the beginning of the last speech by because about the transatlantic, the role of the transatlantic cooperation in this 2020 fund. Quite interesting when I'm wondering if yeah, I see Antonio ready for a follow-up. Please go ahead.
Thanks. I listened with a lot of interest to what Gonzalez-Paramo was saying a moment ago, and I would tend to, I'm talking especially on the transatlantic side, and I would tend to agree with them. Just like to maybe put a couple of nuances from a European perspective. The first one is that the transatlantic relationship needs to be rebuilt largely. And let's not forget that it was in a great shape before the arrival of Trump. I mean, we had negotiated for what 6 or 7 years with the Obama administration a bilateral trade agreement to go nowhere. So we need to rebuild largely this relationship with the United States, and the Commission has put forward a plan basically a week ago for that purpose. And I think that there's a huge scope of collaboration with the new Biden administration. On the multilateral front, Asia is catching up. That's basically what is happening. It's a novelty. It's clearly China stepping up its role, made often to, as it was recalled, to initiatives taken by others, but is also a reflection of catching up. And with the difficulties and also to a large extent, the completion, if you want, of what can be done at bilateral level especially by the European Union, I would expect that this catching up is going to continue in the future. The question is, as this catching up is taking place, what are we going to do in Geneva with the WTO and other international organizations. And I think that there we need to have some very clear sign from DC on how together we can relaunch a multilateral trade agenda, or at least a multilateral trade consensus on the way forward. And the judges on these, I think, is still out.
I was wondering if Jose or Mark, want to reply on the provocation by Nicola and Antonio's reply. Jose, please. I see.
No, just very briefly to say on the last point, it is indeed true that we didn't make a huge progress before the current presidency of the US, but one has to remember that we were pretty close to signing a TTIP, diminished. Now we have to start from scratch. I don't think it was a crazy agreement to ambition, but a few things, including arbitration, including public procurement, and also on our side, the protections in the agricultural sector, the thing failed. But I think it's good to remember also that the European Union in this period of the last 4 years has, I think, stood up to the principles that are behind this idea of supporting multilateralism and rules-based agreements. Remember the agreements with Canada, remember the negotiations on the upgrading of the treaty with Mexico, remember the goodwill that has been behind the agreement, and let's see what happens with Mercosur, with Japan and with others. So in the world, we were a bit distracted in the transatlantic area. Europe, I think, has been, waving the flag of multilateralism. On finance, I cannot agree more with what Nicola has said, always with this positive spin that he puts in his remarks, full agreement on what is the main priorities of the agenda going forward. I'm also celebrating, like him, that many of the rules and institutions we have given ourselves in the aftermath of the crisis have passed relatively well the test of the COVID crisis. So in that sense, I think we have to congratulate ourselves.
Thanks, Jose. I think that in Rome, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. I think this transatlantic question, we have to not be naive. Maybe we were close to sign the TTIP, but we were also close to win the World Cup. And at the end, there is only one who makes it. The Mercosur example is very clear. I mean, nobody is ready to sign it in Europe, because it is the hostage of the political issues in every single country. And so we cannot forget the difficulties today. There is a movement of nationalism everywhere. There is a movement of claim for sovereignty everywhere. And I think that it's not only a question of style. The basic opposition between China and the US will remain the basis of the commercial politics in the US, and the issue for the European is to be able to build something on their own forces and avoid to be just the adaptation of the result of the strength relationship between the US and China. We have to deal with this, and this is why we need a more coherent Europe. We were today, the priority was to fight the virus issue, and of course we cannot have several objectives at the same time, but if we can get out of this, and we can hope that this will be for next year after with the vaccine, that we should be able to be very unite in a new project. And maybe the Brexit is a chance for us, and not in the order to have a common vision on this.
I'm wondering if Virgilio or Marchella has anything to add on the discussion as we are wrapping it up. I found, what Maria Chiara said on the fact that COVID help talks. I think it's might be an interesting point even for the future. I mean, we showed, and the vaccine, also the success of vaccine. Then we will see the rollout of the vaccine, how it goes. But clearly, there are some positive signs coming out of this.
Yeah, if you allowed me, it's also, since not since I'm sitting here, I mean, as president of UNIDROIT, but also for what I've done in the last 20 years in negotiations, always in harmonization of law and things. I think we should also start considering, of course, what is important is the big deals, the big agreements, and the big relationships and geopolitical areas. But do not forget that there is a lot of multilateralism that happens in other international organizations. There are many forms of multilateralism that work pretty well, and that somehow influence the shape of governance, because now we have no time to discuss in deep the financial market, but I think that all the kind of cooperation that we have since decades in all the standard setting bodies that we have at the BIS in Geneva, and all what has been done through central banks and through financial authorities is a kind of governance that works, in my understanding, extremely well. And it is not really transatlantic against something else. It has a completely different kind of shaping. Of course, you also have the big areas, geopolitical area and everything, especially when you deal with military, peace, and this kind of, or even migration. But if you look at, what I look every day, which is more the commercial side and the trade side, I do see a lot of multilateralism simply in different shapes. We don't speak so much about that because it's more in the shadow, because the results are small, because they are slow, so they don't go into newspapers. But it is a part of reality that is fundamental in terms of cooperation. And also, if you go back to the vaccines, we all have a lot of criticism against the WHO, but we do prize what's happening in the cooperation with ONG, and I mean the Commission is financing joint ventures and funds that work in the sector and finance and have financed the vaccines. It is an alternative way of looking to things. But said so, I think that the real message also, because like Pier, Virgilio, and I'm sure also Antonio, I'm an old, I mean, I'm old in terms of age, but I'm a young federalist since I was extremely young. And what I think, and that Europe should be much stronger than it is, and have a policy on the Mediterranean. I mean, from a policy point of view, we should really try to be much stronger than we are. And then you see my young spirit when with Pier, Virgilio, and Antonio, we were going to, on street, try to get some results from Spinelli and his manifesto.
Yeah. Tommaso?
Let me see if we have time for
yes, Tommaso, you have 10 more minutes.
Okay, so please go ahead.
Yeah, as concerned as the multilateralism, I think that if European Union would play a role you know that in the United Nations, there is now a group with the name Uniting for Consensus that want to reopen the debate concerning the reform of the United Nations Security Council. I think that that is the moment for the European Union to play a role and to put on the table, on the agenda, some proposals concerning the reform of the United Nations Security Council. This uniting, probably Antonio knows very well these ideas of uniting for consensus, which with the idea to more a regional integration. It's very minimalist for the moment approach, but I think that on this point, European Union has to play a role, even open a discussion with we have to see what the new Biden administration would do. You know, this manifesto of Joe Biden published in Foreign Affairs last March, speaking about a summit of democracies. So I think that that is a point in which European Union could play a role. And because Maria Chiara spoke about the federalism at Spinelli, you remember very well the speech of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 4th of July, 1962, saying we need more interdependence between Europe and the United States. But to have more interdependence, we need more political united Europe. So if we want to play a role next in the 2021, we will celebrate the speech of John Fitzgerald Kennedy about interdependence. I hope that European Union could put on the table a proposal addressed to Joe Biden to create a real interdependence between the United States of America and, because you spoke about Spinelli, United States of Europe. We have 1 year and a half to prepare this meeting, but we have to take into account this anniversary of the 4th July 1962, in which John Fitzgerald Kennedy asked the European Union to play a more role concerning the interdependence.
Who wanna reply to Pier Virgilio and the United States of Europe? Go,
Yes.
Nicola.
Yes, thank you. There's an interesting game playing, and by the way, I think Mark Sobel had asked for the floor before me, so so I hope we will hear from him. But as you give me the opportunity, there's an interesting story going on in terms of framing this relationship between the EU, China, and the US, which I think is something that will preoccupy all of us in the next few years. If you take something like TPP or CPTPP, by the way, which includes at this point neither of the three, there's also an intriguing game, right? Because there's a question whether the US joins TPP, which it initially launched. There's a question whether China joins TPP, as Xi Jinping said, sincerely or not, that he wants to. And there's also a question about Europe. Shouldn't Europe join TPP? After all, that may be a good way to advance a multilateral agenda, but Europeans seem to have a little bit of a psychological block about that possibility. One thing I will note, and here possibly with some contrast with some other ways to look at it, there's a lot of emphasis on the US and Europe and the EU, sorry, ganging together against China, and that creates a lot of feel-good sentiment across the Atlantic. As a European living in Washington, I can testify to that. But is it really what we're talking about here? There is, of course, the European Union strategy paper of last year, which depicts China as a systemic rival, promoting an alternative model of governance. How much of a consensus this paper conveys is debatable. It was drafted in a hurry, I'm told, by a very limited number of individuals. Angela Merkel, who is one of the senior politicians in Europe, I guess, has a different way of talking about it, because she uses the word partnership, both in her, if I follow the news correctly, both in the way she depicts the future European Union relationship with China and also with the US. And by the way, in the context of EU-US partnership is a word with a long history since the 1950s and 1960s, at a time when it probably was more prominently discussed than is currently the case. So I leave it there, but I think these words matter, because words convey ideas, and ideas matter for this kind of things. And I think the kind of mental map that is emerging is still far from settled.
Thanks, Nicola. Ideas matter. It's a great claim. Sorry, Mark, if I missed your request. I think it's a great way to conclude our panel, giving you, the final thoughts as we had your opening remarks.
Thank you. You're too kind. I have been listening to Nicholas. He's interesting and provocative as usual. And I think he makes a number of great points, and I largely agree with them. I think that there is tremendous scope to improve the transatlantic relationship and revitalize it, but I don't think, and I think I mentioned this in my opening remarks, I don't really see this as a panacea. There are going to be challenges to be sure, and differences to work through. I mentioned quite a few of them that pertain just to the US and the EU. I welcome Nicholas bringing the Asian dimension into this discussion. He was right to do so. I noted in my opening remarks that China is going to be the top foreign policy priority of the new administration. I think that this opens scope for the US and the EU to work together and perhaps pose somewhat of a common front. But again, as I highlighted, I think that there are still going to be differences in our approaches to China. There's a very tough view across the entire political spectrum in the United States towards China, and I don't think Europe will necessarily share the strength of that feeling. And Europe has its own trading and other relationships with China, which will influence its thinking. And I go back to my career in the Treasury, working on issues about China currency back before the global financial crisis. And in Europe and the US, we're not necessarily in the same place. Europe wasn't so happy to be asked to follow the United States at the time. So I think tremendous opportunities for strengthening transatlantic relationship. It's part of a global community where the Asia is rising, and I think we have to welcome the improved tone that is going to take place in the relationship. But I think we also have to approach that new reality with greater realism and pragmatism.
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, let me thank Feva for inviting me to host this panel, because I think we are getting out after a couple of hours of discussion enriched, which for me is it's clearly important and interesting. I'm taking the duty to say, even if no one told me before, that would be great to do the same panel in 1 year time in Rome physically, and it will mean that the most of the issue with the pandemic is over, and it would be great to to meet all of you in person. I thanks again Gianni for for inviting me, and I leaving the floor. I thank everyone who was on the panel and shared their ideas and vision with us. I still do think that ideas matter, so sharing ideas is probably one of the best things we can do in our life. So thank you very much, and thanks again. And I leave the floor to Gianni for the closing remarks for this very intense 2 days with a lot of participants, many ideas, and also some breaking news we came out of the forum as a reporter, I can say.
Tommaso, thanks, really thanks. And we thank, of course, all the panelists here, Bernard Spitz with me in Rome, and all the panelists connected from Washington to Milan, to Madrid, maybe, to Rome, and from all over the world, I would say, for this panel. We couldn't have guessed a better panel to conclude our forum. And I think that it has been a very, very rich and provocative debate, and a very, very nice ending for our debate. So I think that I want to say hello to our panelists, and let us give the floor, and I would say the stage, also to Paolo Garonna for his conclusion, and thanks, of course, to everybody. So Paolo, please reach us and take the floor. We are very careful, of course, because of the COVID restrictions. So, Paolo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. Very interesting discussions. But ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the Rome Investment Forum is coming to an end. We have had, as I think Tommaso mentioned, that we had a very intense and rich discussion in the last 2 days, forward-looking, constructive discussion. And I think I wouldn't want to end it by recapping the main points, going backwards, if you want, but rather looking forwards, looking towards the follow-up and what we need to do next year, the year that is about to start, 2021, which will be a critical year. I think Panetta rightly called the pandemic year. It will be the year of the last battle against the virus. I think we end the year on a positive note because we have promising signals, we have a vaccine, we are learning from the experience, we have reacted in terms of economic policies, but there will be a final battle to go through. We will win the war. There is no question about that. We will win the war against the virus, but the question is how many more victims, how much more damage, how are we going to reconstruct after the war? So for that reason, I think next year will be a good one. I agree with what was said, I think a few minutes ago, that 2020 was a year of unexpected tragedies, the virus, but also that in 2020 we have created the right conditions for recovery. I think it's been a year where we made amazing and unprecedented breakthrough in Europe and not only Europe. So I think we have started the reconstruction, we have started the post-war reconstruction, the recovery already this year, as I think this happens in all years. You remember the Bretton Woods conference was in 1944, before the end of the war, and actually the manifesto of Ventotene was even in 1942, in the middle of the war, 1942, 1943. So I think this is the time for getting the conditions for recovery and reconstruction right. The ingredients are there, but the challenge is to put the ingredients to work and then to have a recipe. I think, we all know from the Italian cuisine, we need to have good ingredients, but then, we need to have a creative recipe. We have monetary policy conditions, we have fiscal policy progress, the next generation EU, the Green New Deal, we have the financial resources, the firepower that we have put in place in Europe, particularly Europe, but not only Europe. We have new global initiatives. So I think we have now to make it work by putting these ingredients together. And this is really what will be the crucial business for next year. Mario Nava was saying, I think, now the exam sessions start. I mean, for something like me, as a professor, this is a fact. I mean, the final exams start next week, and it's a critical period, not only for the students, but also for the teachers, because they are also going to be examined. And so I think we need to look at what is the secret for success for making 2021 work in this direction. I think if I can try to capture the various messages in one word, I would say that comes drawing lessons from what we discussed the last couple of days. I would say the secret of success is in reforms. We need to push through reforms, bold, in-depth reforms. We are really, basically, I believe, at a fork, at a crossroad. We can either take the easy road, use the resources to gain time, to postpone adjustment, to keep going what is unsustainable. And the temptation, believe me, is quite strong to go that way because adjustment is painful. Adjustment is disruptive. It's what Schumpeter called the creative destruction. Or this is the alternative, which I think is not an option, should be the way we have to go. We engage in reforms. So we get away with bad old habits. We embrace innovation. We go to the roots of the problems, the roots of the obstacles. Some of those obstacles predate the pandemic, but they have to be faced up now. And then we build a better world after the crisis in the direction of sustainability, ESG, in the direction of resilience. So I think in that paradigm, I think the financial sector has a crucial role to play because to transfer resources from what is not sustainable, from what is not resilient, towards more sustainability, towards more resilience, this is the job of the financial sector, which means, I repeat, a painful job because we would have to deal with the disruptions that are implied by this transfer of resources, but means also new jobs, means also new firms, new technologies, new products, new processes. And then I think the transition has to have that vision in mind. And I think the essence, in a nutshell, of leadership is exactly that, to point out what is at the end of the tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, there is this vision of a better world that we want to get out of the crisis with. I think we discussed, I don't want to go into the details because we discussed a lot of actually technical issues. We discussed how we deal with NPLs, how we accelerate the transition towards banking union, towards capital markets union, sustainable finance, fintech, and we emphasized the role of the financial sector, which is central in the allocation of savings towards the future, in bridging the past towards the future. Now, we also are aware of the problem of the debt that is growing, not only private, but also public debt. But that is, you see, is the other side of the coin. That means also credit. And I think the critical dimension, the critical distinction here is what Mario Draghi has insisted upon, the distinction between bad debt and good debt. So I think we are going to need that. We are growing in terms of debt, but I think what we have to make sure that we use the debt, the resources, to create more capacity, to enable our economies to grow, to create opportunities for prosperity, for improving the quality of life. And so I think we come to the third and final magic word that I think comes out as a kind of lesson from these 2 days of discussion, and that is sustainability, that is resilience, and for the financial sector, sustainable finance. I think we have learned through the crisis, we have learned the hard way how much tail risks are important. We are used to think of tail risk as something that, we only look at in the long term, that they evolve gradually, slow trains, but then there come tipping points, and I think we went through a tipping point. And so the question of stranded assets, which again, a textbook concept that we used to think in the Keynesian approach of, in the long run, we're all dead. It's something, for the 2050 or 2100 perspective. No, I think this is something that is with us now. And I think we have seen the change of minds, the change of attitudes, the change of culture in the financial sector. This topic, the question of sustainable finance, has come to the core. From the periphery has come to the mainstream of our concerns, the concerns of CEOs, concerns of business leaders, concerns of monetary policy, central banks. And so I think we need to live in a world where we cope better by managing tail risks, by managing uncertainty, structural uncertainties. On that, I can only confirm the engagement of our financial community to be at the forefront of this battle. We will be creating, as I think it was mentioned by Yerusalmi, I think, in this forum, the creation of this Milan Center for Sustainable Finance with Borsa Italiana and with the Forum for Sustainable Finance. Also at the international level, I think 2021 can start on a positive note. We have created new promising conditions. Probably in 2020 we have reached the bottom. We have started an upswing, and the magic word here too, I believe, is reform. And we have been discussing, I don't want to dwell with it too long because we have been discussing just until a few minutes ago. There is certainly no going back to the old world order, but definitely we are going to be engaged in building new multilateralism, new transatlantic relation, new global role for Europe, the European Union and the Euro, which is consistent with the strategic autonomy of which we have been talking about in Europe, and also revitalized organizations like the G7, the G20, and the Paris Accords and COP 26, the reform of WTO, the reform of the WHO, etc., etc. Is this a new world order? Is this the beginning of a new world order? I think we have been realistic. We have learned it from the previous discussion. But, I draw from the last discussion two important messages, I think, worth highlighting. First of all, the spirit of Bretton Woods is still there, still alive and kicking. And I think it was reflected by the different contributions, perhaps also diverging contributions, but the spirit is there. And second, that the battle and the battlefield is not a battle of powers, a battle of economic dominance, a battle of markets, but it's a battle of values. And then in a battle of values, I think the transatlantic alliance has a role to play, has a very important role to play. As a Roman, I always remind people that Grecia capta ferum victorem cepit. So I think in the war between the wild Romans and Greece, of course, the Romans won, but then in the end it was the Greece that won with their values, the value of democracy, the value of human rights. I think on that, it's a battle that we have to struggle on, but I think the transatlantic values, which we used to call Western values, and I think Nicola is right, and I think now we have interesting winds, contradictory winds coming also from the East. So I think on that we have to engage. And definitely we are engaged at FEBAF in supporting G7, G20 and COP26. Italy is involved and us, the Italian financial community, will be involved at the bilateral level. I think we have engaged with our partners, with the French, with the Spaniards, with the Germans, and all our partners in Europe, but also with the Americans, and why not with the Asians. I think we are engaged to support those processes. And also I think we are engaged in the pan-European dimension to work in the near abroad of the European Union, the Eastern dimension, the Balkans, the Southern dimension, the Mediterranean, and also the post-Brexit UK. And I think we are engaged with the City UK to continue our discussion also in the post-Brexit environment. So ladies and gentlemen, I think it's now really time to bring the Rome Investment Forum to an end. My remaining task is now to thank all those who contributed to our proceedings, and I start with our great partners that we had for this meeting. Start with AFME, the Association for Financial Markets in Europe, and Bloomberg in London. I think we had a very close connection and interaction with London, and also this afternoon I think you saw how fruitful it is, our cooperation with the Bretton Woods Committee from Washington. I think we will have to continue that cooperation in the future. We had the patronage, we were lucky, the privilege of having the patronage of the European Parliament and the European Commission, and we had a lot of other partners, ABI, the Italian Banking Association, Formazione, ABI Servizi, di Associazione Nazionale per lo Studio dei Problemi del Credito, a National Association of Bankers and Insurers, il Movimento Europeo Italia, the European Movement Italy, and FASI as our media partners. We also want to praise and thank a lot the studio we are in, the facilities that we have used, the new technologies. I think they helped us really to have this edition, the backstage, and all the people that have worked with us to make this possible, and also to try to make it lively, to adopt a new format that probably will stay with us even in the post-COVID world. And Informa Sistemi, with all the support that we had from the devices and the technologies. I thank the art director Francesco Patierno. Great job, Francesco and his crew. I think they showed us how powerful are images, and if you want, the way we organize the dialogue. In a forum, it's also important to have lively discussions, and you can somehow carry through messages and carry through a narrative using not only words, but also images. And I think that was done in a very powerful way. And finally, last but not least, I want to thank all my friends at the Italian Banking, Insurance and Finance Federation, our FEBAF team, Manuel Fares, Franco Del Neri, Gianni Rizzuti. Gianni, I think, he's become really our anchor man, and I think, you know, we will definitely for now also use it as an anchor person for all our events. But also Giovanna, Flaminia, Fabrizio, and the young people that are working with us. I mean, I think they have given us a great contribution. Asia, Lucilla, Antonio, Lorenzo. I think the secret of our resilience, facing up adversity, was exactly that. I mean, the ability to work as a team. So, ladies and gentlemen. But I want to thank really all of you, because I think, ladies and gentlemen, this is really the end. The good thing is that we will see you next year, and we definitely count on seeing you here in Rome. So I think the commitment is that we see each other in a year time here in Rome. So arrivederci, arrivederci a Roma. Goodbye to everybody. Goodbye to everybody.